So I want you to imagine something for a second. Imagine you've got this, like, homesteading hack, just a pure, unadulterated efficiency hack.
Oh, I love a good efficiency hack.
Right. And this one, it offers you the absolute maximum food yield possible. But it comes with this microscopic physical footprint.
Which is pretty rare, honestly.
It totally is. Because, it completely flips the traditional script of agriculture on its head. Usually, when we think of a homestead, when you picture that idyllic, self-sustaining life, what do you see?
Well, you usually picture acreage. Wide open pastures, big herds of cattle.
Exactly. You picture pigs needing massive pens or these big rambling flocks of chickens taking up half the yard.
Yeah, it's this deeply ingrained idea that to get a lot of food, you have to give up a lot of space.
But what if that just wasn't true? What if the key to a massive, sustainable bounty could literally fit in a corner of your backyard?
It's sort of the ultimate paradox of scale, really.
Yeah.
We're so conditioned by modern agricultural norms to believe that abundance requires expansion. We think in terms of acres, not inches. But in this case, true abundance actually comes from extreme concentration.
Hyper-efficiency. And that is exactly what we are diving into today.
Let's do it.
I've been digging through this fascinating stack of source material. We've got homesteader guides, presentation notes, Q&A sheets, and the mission of this deep dive today is to build a masterclass.
A definitive masterclass.
Exactly. And specifically, we're building this as an audio overview for a 15-minute lunch and learn style talk geared toward a group of southeastern Alabama homesteaders.
Oh, nice. That's a very specific, challenging climate to work in.
It really is. So we're going to tailor this to the realities of a small Alabama homestead. We're talking about the Coturnix quail, also known as the Japanese quail.
An amazing bird.
So we're going to walk you through the crucial first 30 days of a new flock. We'll break down the daily tasks, and we'll share tips for overcoming those common beginner challenges down there in the South.
Especially managing the Alabama heat and cold, which we'll cover with a seasonal calendar later on.
Right, and how to sustain egg production through the fall and winter months. But right off the bat, we need to clear something up.
Okay, what's that?
Well, when I first looked at the size of these birds, I thought, okay, this is an ornamental bird. This is just a hobby.
Oh, yeah, a lot of people think that.
Right. But the guys are absolutely adamant that this is not a novelty pet.
Not even close. And honestly, that is a massive misconception you have to discard right away if you're going to succeed with them.
So what are they then?
The Coturnix quail is a serious, highly optimized, dual-purpose production powerhouse.
Dual purpose meaning meat and eggs, right?
Exactly. They are biologically engineered through centuries of selective breeding for both high-volume egg production and rapid meat production.
Wow.
They're a strategic asset, especially for a homesteader who values fast turnaround and food security over raising large, slow-growing livestock. You aren't raising a parakeet here. You are managing a high-speed biological engine.
A high-speed biological engine. I love that phrasing. Because these birds, they move at a timeline that makes chickens look like they're in slow motion.
Oh, absolutely.
There is zero grace period for a homesteader. You have to be ready for action from day one. So let's start the clock on the first 30 days.
The critical window.
Right. You bring these newly hatched chicks home, or you pull them out of your incubator, and you put them in your brooder. Now, I was looking at the space requirements for this initial 0 to 3 week phase, and it honestly blew my mind.
4 to 6 square inches.
That's right, yes. 4 to 6 square inches per chick. I had to read that twice. That is practically nothing.
It is minuscule, but you really have to visualize the animal we're talking about. A newly hatched Coturnix quail chick is roughly the size of a bumblebee.
A bumblebee.
Seriously, they weigh practically nothing. But that tiny space requirement isn't just about their physical dimensions. It's deeply tied to their thermodynamics.
Okay, break that down for me. Thermodynamics.
Yeah, so at that age, they cannot regulate their own body heat at all. By keeping them in a dense, heavily restricted footprint under the heat plate or the lamp, you're minimizing the ambient air volume they need to keep warm.
Oh, so they aren't heating up empty space.
Precisely. If you put 10 quail chicks in a massive, sprawling brooder, they will expend way too much energy just walking around. They'll get chilled, and they will literally die of hypothermia.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. It's about thermal efficiency.
Yeah.
But then looking at the architecture of the brooder itself, the guides emphasize that you need a tightly enclosed box with a very secure lid.
Yes, highly secure.
But specifically, a low ceiling or a soft mesh top. If they are the size of bumblebees, why do I need a heavy-duty mesh roof on day 2?
Sure.
Like, are we worried about them flying away before they even have real feathers?
Well, not flying away, no, but you're dealing with a game bird. And game birds have this incredibly potent, hardwired evolutionary defense mechanism.
The startle response.
Exactly. It's their startle response. Even at just a few days old, if a shadow passes over that brooder, or say you drop a feed scoop and make a loud noise, their instinct isn't to run for cover like a baby chicken would.
So what do they do?
Their instinct is to explosively launch themselves straight upward.
Like a spring-loaded toy.
Exactly like that. It is all fast-twitch muscle fiber. So if you have a brooder with a high, hard wooden ceiling, or even a hard plastic lid, these tiny chicks will launch themselves upward with just astonishing force.
And they hit the roof?
They hit the roof, and it causes severe head trauma. They will literally break their own skulls.
That is wild to me.
Yeah, a low ceiling prevents them from gaining dangerous momentum, and a soft mesh top gives them like a trampoline-like cushion if they do manage to jump.
Day 2. And they are already a danger to themselves just by getting spooked. That is intense. And that self-destructive tendency carries right over into how you give them water.
Oh, the watering is a huge hurdle for beginners.
Yeah, I noticed a massive warning in the notes. It says you absolutely cannot use a standard chicken waterer.
No, never.
You have to use narrow lip waterers, or put pebbles and marbles in their water dishes, or use specialized nipple systems. I mean, it's just water. It's like leaving a newborn human next to an Olympic swimming pool, I guess.
That's actually a really accurate analogy. A standard chicken waterer has a trough that is maybe an inch deep and an inch wide.
Right.
To a Coturnix chick, that is a deep, fast-flowing river with slippery plastic banks. Because they're so small and their movements are so erratic, they will inevitably step right into it.
And once they get wet.
It's over. 2 things happen. First, the thermodynamics we just talked about totally collapse. They get chilled and die of hypothermia incredibly fast.
Yeah, the second thing.
Second, because the plastic is smooth, they physically cannot gain the traction to climb back out of a 1-inch trough. They will drown in an inch of water.
Wow. So you fill the trough with glass marbles.
Yeah, marbles are clean pebbles. By filling the water trough with those, you displace the volume of the water. The water just fills the microscopic spaces between the marbles.
Oh, I see.
So the tiny chick can dip the very tip of its beak into those crevices and drink perfectly fine, but it is physically impossible for them to step into a pool of standing water.
That's a brilliant hack.
It is, though if you want ultimate efficiency, especially for a larger Alabama setup, nipple systems are better.
The ones that release a drop of water when pecked.
Exactly. Those little metal valves eliminate the open water hazard entirely. Plus, they have the added benefit of staying completely sanitary.
Okay, so we've stopped them from launching themselves into the ceiling, and we've stopped them from drowning in their own drinking water.
A successful first week.
Right. But now we have to feed them. And here is where I really need you to unpack the biology for me, because I want to push back on what the guides are demanding here.
Okay, let's hear it.
They state that quail require high protein, specifically a 28 to 30% game bird starter feed for the first 4 to 6 weeks.
Yes, that is crucial.
And they explicitly warn that if you use a standard 16% chicken feed, it causes poor growth, feather picking, and low egg production. But wait, poultry is poultry, right?
Oh, well.
Like, can't I just go to the local feed store in Dothan or somewhere, buy a giant, cheap 50-pound bag of 16% chicken feed and call it a day?
I wouldn't recommend it.
I mean, think about it like feeding a growing human toddler plain white rice. Sure, it's not a perfectly balanced diet, but they'll survive, right?
Yeah.
They just might not thrive optimally. Is the 30% protein rule really non-negotiable?
It is entirely non-negotiable. And your toddler analogy, while conceptually sound, completely underestimates the speed at which this biological engine is running.
Okay, correct me.
You have to remember, you are not raising a chicken. You are raising a high-performance game bird. A standard chicken takes, 20 to 24 weeks to reach sexual maturity?
Right, around 6 months usually.
A Coturnix quail reaches full sexual maturity and begins laying eggs in 6 to 8 weeks.
6 weeks. That is just fast-forwarding biology.
Precisely. And you have to ask yourself, what fuels that hyper-accelerated cellular division? What fuels that rapid bone calcification and explosive feather development?
I'm guessing protein?
Massive amounts of amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein. Specifically, they need high levels of methionine and lysine. If you provide a growing quail with only 16% protein, that cheap chicken feed, you are literally starving its metabolic engine.
Wow, literally starving.
Yeah. The bird is desperately trying to build adult muscle mass and internal organs in a matter of weeks, and you are denying it the raw materials.
Okay, so they grow a little slower. Is that really the end of the world for a backyard homesteader in Alabama?
It doesn't just slow their growth, it completely breaks their behavior. The guides mention feather picking, right?
Yeah, which sounds like a mild annoyance, like a bad habit.
It is a highly sanitized term for something quite grim.
Oh boy.
So feathers are primarily made of keratin, which is a structural protein. Blood is also incredibly rich in protein. When a quail is deprived of its necessary 30% dietary protein, its physiological craving becomes so intense that they actually turn on each other.
Oh wow, like little vampires.
Basically, yeah. They will aggressively peck the developing feathers out of their flockmates' backs and wings just to consume the keratin.
That's horrifying.
It gets worse. Pulling those blood feathers causes open bleeding. Because they are omnivorous game birds, the sight and taste of blood triggers a feeding frenzy. If you cheap out on the feed, your flock will literally cannibalize itself right there in the brooder.
Okay, point taken. Do not buy the cheap chicken feed. You are buying the high-octane 30% game bird starter, or you are running a horror show in your backyard.
Exactly. Don't skimp on the feed.
So we survived the first 3 weeks. Now we hit weeks 3 to 6. This is the grower stage. Space requirements expand a bit, up to 0.3 to 0.5 square feet per bird.
They need a little more legroom, yeah.
But the major milestone here isn't size, right? It's psychological. Right around week 4 to 5, the males begin crowing. The teenage drama kicks in.
Oh, the teenage drama. This is the exact moment their endocrine system floods their bodies with hormones. At week 5, these birds are mere days away from full adulthood.
Okay.
The adolescent males begin to establish dominance. They start territory marking. And their crowing, it isn't like a rooster's morning alarm. It's a very distinct, raspy, almost mechanical trill.
Kind of like a cricket or a weird frog.
Yeah, exactly. And if you do not actively manage their ratios in space at this exact moment, you will have severe hormonal fighting erupting rapidly.
Which means the homesteader has to be highly observant. You can't just set a timer and walk away.
You have to be in tune with the flock.
You have to actively identify those males, either by their crowing or, I think the guides mentioned, their chest feather patterns.
Right, the rusty-colored chest feathers on the standard varieties.
And you separate them early to prevent a gang war, which totally shifts the dynamic, because once they hit that 6-week mark, they aren't chicks anymore. They are adults.
Ready for the real world.
You have to move them out of the brooder and into their permanent adult housing. And when I was reading the architecture requirements for this adult housing, I stumbled on what has to be the strangest rule in the entire poultry world.
It absolutely catches beginner homesteaders completely off guard because it really defies common sense.
Let's talk about it. The adult housing and the flesh factor. First, the space requirements. You've got your cages or hutches requiring roughly 0.5 to 1.0 square feet per bird.
Standard for backyard setups.
Then you have aviaries requiring 1 to 2 plus square feet. But there was this detail about commercial breeders in the notes. It noted that in commercial setups, they sometimes squeeze 3 birds per square foot in wire cages.
Yes. Very dense.
Now, hold on. I have to push back on this hard. 3 birds per square foot. That sounds incredibly unethical. You're just packing them in like sardines.
It does sound bad.
Doesn't that skyrocket their cortisol levels? How is that biologically justifiable, even from a pure efficiency standpoint? We usually associate crowding with extreme aggression and stress.
It sounds totally counterintuitive, and I want to be very clear that most backyard homesteaders do not and should not run commercial densities.
Right.
But understanding why commercial operations do it reveals a lot about quail psychology. It's actually a hack of their territorial software.
What do you mean by territorial software?
So if you give a quail just enough space, say 2 square feet, it will map that area in its brain, claim it as its territory, and violently defend the borders of that territory against other birds.
Okay, that's natural.
But if you pack them in at 3 birds per square foot, it is physically impossible for any single bird to draw an invisible line and say, "This is mine." The extreme density essentially short-circuits their brain's ability to establish a territory.
Wow.
Because no one can claim a territory, no one fights over territory.
That is fascinating. So the aggression drops because the concept of ownership is just completely erased by the density.
Actually.
But obviously, their quality of life is practically zero in that scenario, which is why the guides recommend the 0.5 to 1.0 square foot rule for a healthy, ethical backyard flock.
Which is what you'd want on an Alabama homestead.
Right. But here is the architectural rule that completely bewildered me. The height of the enclosure. The guides are militant about this. They say enclosures must be extremely short, exactly 8 to 12 inches tall. Or they must be incredibly tall, over 6 feet.
Nothing in between.
Nothing. This is like building a parking garage where the ceilings have to be exactly 4 feet tall so the cars physically can't speed, or 100 feet tall so they can fly. Why is there no middle ground? Why can't I build a comfortable 3-foot-tall hutch in my backyard so I can easily reach in and clean it?
Because a 3-foot-tall hutch is a literal death trap.
A death trap.
It goes right back to that startle response we discussed in the brooder stage, the flush reflex. The biomechanics of this are crucial to understand, especially in the southeast, where you have a lot of predators sniffing around at night.
Okay, break down the physics of the flush for me.
Let's say it is midnight on your homestead. A raccoon brushes up against the side of your wire cage, or maybe a sudden summer thunderstorm cracks overhead.
Which happens constantly in Alabama.
All the time. Now, a quail's evolutionary defense mechanism against a ground predator is not to run horizontally into the brush like a pheasant might. Their survival strategy is vertical.
Up into the air.
They instantly, explosively fly straight upward to escape the jaws of whatever's on the ground. They launch like popcorn popping.
Just immediate maximum upward velocity.
Exactly. Every fast-twitch muscle fiber in their legs and wings firing simultaneously. Now, if the roof of your cage is only 8 to 12 inches high, the bird flushes, but their head hits the soft wire mesh before they can build any significant kinetic energy.
Oh, I see.
It's just a bump on the head. They drop back down totally unharmed.
They literally don't have the runway to accelerate.
Correct. Now, visualize that 3-foot-tall cage you wanted to build. The bird startles. It launches upward. 3 feet gives that bird the exact distance required to reach terminal vertical velocity.
Okay.
When their skull hits the solid roof at that speed, the impact energy is severe enough to snap their cervical vertebrae, literally breaking their necks, or cause fatal skull fractures.
That is heartbreaking.
It is the #1 mistake beginners make. They build a roomy 3-foot hutch thinking they're giving the birds a luxurious life, and the first time a neighborhood dog barks, half the flock flushes and drops dead on the cage floor.
So the architectural rule is purely about managing kinetic energy. You either keep the roof low enough that they can't speed up,
Or you keep the roof over 6 feet tall, like in a walk-in aviary. In a tall aviary, they have enough vertical airspace to launch, reach the natural apex of their flush, realize there is no predator, and safely flutter back down to the ground without hitting any barrier at all.
That makes total sense when you look at the physics. Now, if you do go with that tall option, the aviary, the guides say you absolutely require visual breaks. You have to put branches, wooden dividers, and hiding spots in there.
Because, as we established with the density discussion, an aviary provides enough space for territories to be formed. And where there are territories, there are disputes.
Right, the turf wars.
A bullied bird needs a place to break the line of sight from an aggressor. If an aggressive male is chasing a hen and she can dart behind a piece of plywood or a thick pine branch, the male's brain essentially resets.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Literally.
Yeah.
Without those visual breaks, he will relentlessly chase her around the perimeter until she is exhausted or injured.
Which brings up a really interesting fork in the road for the homesteader. Deciding between a compact wire floor hutch and a large natural ground aviary isn't just about bird safety or the height of the roof. It completely dictates your daily life on the homestead.
It really does. It changes your whole routine.
Let's look at the daily tasks and hygiene. And what happens if you choose that beautiful natural aviary? I actually laughed out loud when I read this part. Quail rarely go broody, and they absolutely do not use nesting boxes.
They do not care about your carpentry skills at all.
Right. If you build them a cute little row of wooden nesting boxes with fresh straw in them, like you would for a flock of Rhode Island Reds, they completely ignore them. In an aviary, they just drop their eggs wherever they happen to be standing.
Yep, just right in the dirt.
The guides call it a daily chaotic Easter egg hunt. You literally have to walk into the aviary every morning and hunt through the dirt, the tall grass, and under the pine branches just to find your breakfast.
It paints a very charming pastoral image, doesn't it? But from a practical homesteading perspective, it's a massive daily inefficiency. If you are trying to manage chores before heading to a full-time job, spending 20 minutes searching through the brush for camouflaged eggs gets old very fast.
But the time lost isn't even the worst part. The notes highlight serious issues with egg cleanliness and foot health in aviaries. If an egg drops on dirt or damp bedding, it's instantly exposed to soil bacteria and manure.
Especially in the damp Alabama winters.
Oh, true. And you have to thoroughly wash and sanitize every single egg, which removes the bloom, the natural protective coating on the egg, which decreases its shelf life. And direct ground contact causes exposure to soil-borne parasites and bumblefoot.
Bumblefoot is a massive issue in ground aviaries.
What exactly is bumblefoot?
It's a severe staph infection, Staphylococcus aureus. It occurs when a bird inevitably steps on a sharp rock or a rough piece of wood, creating a microabrasion on the pad of their foot.
And because they walk where they poop.
Because they're living on the soil where they defecate, that bacteria enters the wound, causing a massive, painful, swollen abscess that the homesteader literally has to surgically lancentrate.
So let me put myself in the homesteader's shoes here. If ground aviaries cause dirty eggs that I have to scrub daily, expose my birds to staph infections and soil parasites, and force me to hunt for my breakfast in the mud every morning, why on earth would I ever choose an aviary over a clean, sloped wire hutch where the eggs just gently roll to a front collection trough?
That is the classic homesteader's dilemma. You're balancing ultimate operational efficiency against animal enrichment. The sloped wider hutch, where the birds live on a tight wire mesh, the manure drops through to a catch tray, and the eggs roll out spotless, is the gold standard for disease prevention and efficiency.
Because the birds never touch their own waste.
There is zero risk of soil-borne parasites like coccidiosis.
It sounds functionally perfect.
Functionally, yes. But philosophically, some people want their animals to exhibit natural behaviors. They want to see the quail scratching in the dirt, taking dust baths in the sand to clean their feathers, and foraging for bugs.
The idyllic farm vision.
Exactly. An aviary allows for a complex, naturalistic life. The trade-off for providing that psychological enrichment for the bird is a significant, tangible increase in your daily physical labor and veterinary monitoring.
But whether you choose the high-labor aviary or the high-efficiency hutch, you cannot escape the reality of the manure.
Oh, absolutely not.
And the guides are incredibly specific about quail waste. They call it hot manure, meaning it is exceptionally high in nitrogen. And they warn that in enclosed spaces, this generates sharp ammonia fumes that cause severe eye inflammation and respiratory distress if you don't have strict ventilation and deep tray maintenance.
It's toxic.
I want to dig into the biology of this. I know hot manure will burn your tomato plants if you don't compost it. But why is it so instantly lethal to the bird's lungs?
It comes down to the unique anatomy of the avian respiratory system. Birds do not breathe like mammals do.
How so?
When you or I take a breath, the air goes into our lungs, and then we exhale that same air back out. It's a two-way street. Birds have a highly complex system of air sacs that creates a unidirectional, continuous flow of air through their lungs.
Unidirectional, so it's always moving one way?
Yes. It makes them incredibly efficient at extracting oxygen, which they need for flight, but it also makes them hypersensitive to airborne toxins.
Because the air is constantly cycling through these delicate sacs.
Exactly. Now let's look at the chemistry of the manure. As that high nitrogen waste breaks down, especially if it gets damp, which again, in an Alabama winter, dampness is guaranteed, it rapidly converts into ammonia gas.
And ammonia is bad news.
Highly caustic. When that gas enters the bird's respiratory tract, it dissolves in the natural moisture of their mucous membranes and forms ammonium hydroxide.
Oh, wow. So it's literally creating a caustic chemical inside their lungs.
Yes. It causes chemical burns on the lining of their lungs and the corneas. If you walk past your quail hutch and you can smell that sharp cat litter box ammonia smell, your birds are already suffering tissue damage.
Just from the smell.
Just from the ambient fumes. This makes them highly susceptible to fatal secondary respiratory infections.
So ventilation isn't just an aesthetic choice to keep your yard smelling nice.
Yeah.
It is a critical, non-negotiable health requirement.
100%.
If you are using a tray system under a wire hutch, you are emptying it constantly. If you are using a ground aviary, you are employing a deep bedding system, layering thick, carbon-heavy materials like pine shavings or straw to balance the nitrogen and compost the manure aerobically without releasing the gas.
Exactly. Managing the nitrogen cycle is half of your daily chore list.
And the other half is feeding them, which comes with its own unique headaches. The guides note that quail are notorious for raking feed out of troughs with their beaks.
Oh, they are terribly messy eaters.
Yeah, if you just put a standard bowl of expensive 30% protein feed in there, they will sweep half of it onto the floor.
It's a hardwired foraging instinct. In the wild, they survive by aggressively scratching and raking at the leaf litter on the forest floor to uncover hidden seeds and insects.
So they just do it to their food bowl.
put them in a cage with a bowl of pellets, and their brain tells them to perform that exact same raking motion. They will flick 50% of that high-octane feed right through the wire floor into the manure tray or into the dirt.
Which means you are literally throwing money into the compost pile.
And attracting pests.
Right. Spilled feed on the ground attracts mice, rats, and wild birds, bringing disease right to your fortress. That's why the guides mandate waste-reducing feeders. You have to use port feeders, which are essentially sealed buckets with small PVC elbows sticking out, forcing the bird to stick its head inside the pipe to eat, or feeders with specialized rolled inward lips that physically block the sweeping motion of their beaks.
It is all about engineering the environment to outsmart the bird's natural instincts while maintaining extreme sanitation.
But engineering the physical environment is only part of the puzzle. Managing the bird's actual personalities is where things get truly chaotic. Let's look at flock dynamics and homestead security, because a lot of well-meaning beginners assume these are docile little doves.
They are absolutely not doves, not even close.
The breeding ratios outlined here are brutal. To maintain peace, you must maintain a strict ratio of 1 male to every 4 or 5 females, period.
Ironclad rule.
If you have too many males, they fight to the death. But if you have too few females, the guides say it leads to overmating and scalping, which they define as plucking the feathers and skin entirely off the heads and necks of the hens. I actually cringed reading the term scalping. We started this deep dive talking about an efficient, neighborhood-friendly bird, and suddenly we are in the middle of a territorial gang war. Why on earth do they go for the head?
It is a dark reality of game bird husbandry. The mating drive of a male Coturnix quail is remarkably aggressive. During the mating process, the male mounts the female and physically grabs the feathers on the back of her head, the occipital region, with his beak to anchor himself.
So he just holds on tight.
Right. Now, if you have a proper ratio of 1 male to 5 females, his attention is distributed. But if a male is housed with only 1 or 2 females, he will mate with them dozens of times a day.
So those specific head feathers just get worn out and break off?
They break off completely, and once the hen is bald, the male doesn't stop. He still needs to anchor himself, so he grabs the bare skin. And with enough force, he will literally tear the skin right off her skull.
That is horrific.
It's scalping, it is horrific, it is incredibly painful for the hen, and here's the worst part. If the homesteader does not intervene immediately by removing the injured hen to a separate hospital cage to heal, the other birds in the flock will see the open bleeding wound.
And because of that protein craving we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Their omnivorous instinct kicks in. The entire flock will turn on her and peck her to death to consume the blood.
That is incredibly grim, but it brilliantly underscores why that 1-to-5 ratio is an ironclad law, not a casual suggestion.
You can't ignore it.
But let's say you have a stable flock and you want to expand. You buy 3 new adult hens to add to your setup. The guides heavily warn against this, citing extreme territoriality.
Oh yeah, you can't just drop them in.
It says introducing new mature birds to an established flock causes massive fighting. It requires divider cages or complete pen resets, so all birds establish territory simultaneously. How do you actually execute a pen reset? You can't just open the door and say, "Hey guys, meet the new roommates."
Absolutely not. You have to understand that to a quail, their pen is a rigorously mapped geographic territory in their hippocampus.
Like a GPS layout in their brain.
Exactly. They know every corner, every feeder location, and the hierarchical status of every flockmate. If you drop a strange bird into that mapped territory, the original residents view it as a hostile invasion, and they will attack the intruder relentlessly, often fatally.
So how do you hack that spatial memory?
To do a pen reset, you temporarily remove all the original birds from the enclosure, put them in cardboard boxes or holding crates out of sight. Then you completely change the geography of the pen.
Like redecorate.
Literally. You move the feeders to the opposite side. You move the waterers. You add new pine branches or take old ones away. You change the texture of the bedding. You alter the visual landmarks so completely that it looks like a brand new physical location.
You completely wipe their internal map.
Precisely. Then you introduce the old birds and the new birds into this new environment at the exact same time. Because none of the old birds recognize the landmarks, none of them feel established ownership over the space.
The territorial software is rebooting.
That's a great way to put it. They are all focused on exploring and mapping this new space, and by the time they settle down and establish territories, they have naturally integrated the new birds into the flock hierarchy without the extreme violence of a border defense.
That is a brilliant psychological manipulation. You are literally tricking their spatial memory to keep the peace. But internal violence isn't your only security threat.
Not at all.
The guides heavily emphasize external predators. Quail cannot free-range safely. Unlike a flock of chickens, which will generally put themselves to bed in a secure coop at dusk, or maybe even fight off a small rat, quail are entirely defenseless.
Sitting ducks, basically.
Your enclosures must be absolutely predator-proofed against raccoons, snakes, dogs, cats, hawks, and fencing gaps, especially in a place like southeastern Alabama.
Oh, the predator pressure down south is relentless. High heat, high humidity, dense woods. It's a buffet line for local wildlife.
Let's talk about raccoons, because they are everywhere down there.
Raccoons are incredibly intelligent and have dexterous, hand-like front paws. If you build a quail hutch using standard, wide hexagonal chicken wire, a raccoon will climb up to the cage, reach its hands right through the gaps in the wire, grab a sleeping quail, and pull it through the mesh piece by piece.
Oh, God. So chicken wire is totally useless.
Chicken wire is designed to keep chickens in, not to keep predators out. It is too malleable, and the holes are too large. You must use half-inch hardware cloth, which is a thick, welded, rigid steel mesh.
So they can't reach through.
Right. Furthermore, you have snakes in Alabama, like rat snakes or king snakes, and they can flatten their bodies and squeeze through almost any gap larger than a half-inch.
Which is terrifying.
And if a large rat snake gets into a quail hutch, it won't just eat one egg. It will consume multiple adult quail in a single night. Because a quail's only natural defense is flushing, which we establish is fatal inside a cage, the homesteader is 100% responsible for the physical security barrier.
You are building a fortress.
You have to build a fortress.
Okay, so you build a fortress with a half-inch hardware cloth. You master the low-roof architecture. You manage the high-protein feed, the ammonia, and the territorial gang wars. If you do all that, you are rewarded with a massive bounty. But how do you keep that engine running when the seasons change? Let's move into the seasonal calendar and sustaining the harvest, because climate dictates everything.
Especially in the deep south.
Right. The notes specifically call out heat and cold management. Let's look at extreme heat first. Alabama summers can be brutal. The guides state that high heat, anything above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, can be fatal without shade, ventilation, and misting.
It is a brutal environment for a bird wrapped in thick down feathers. You have to remember, birds do not have sweat glands. They cannot cool their skin through perspiration like mammals do.
So how do they cool off?
Their primary mechanism for thermoregulation in high heat is panting, also known as cooler fluttering. They open their beaks and rapidly flutter their throat muscles, which evaporates moisture from their respiratory tract, cooling the blood vessels in their throat.
But if you are in a climate with extreme summer humidity...
Like an August day in Alabama.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If the ambient air is 95 degrees and heavily saturated with humidity, evaporation basically stops. Panting becomes incredibly inefficient because the air cannot hold any more moisture.
So they just overheat. Their core temperature rises rapidly. If a homesteader places a hutch in direct, unshaded sunlight on a humid 95-degree day, the birds will die of heat stroke within hours.
So what are the active countermeasures? What do you actually do?
You must engineer absolute shade. You must ensure cross-breeze ventilation. And the guides mention misting, installing micromisters that spray a highly pressurized microscopic fog of water into the air just outside the cages.
Oh, like we have at theme parks.
Exactly like that. This leverages the thermodynamics of phase change. As that fine mist evaporates from a liquid into a gas, it pulls latent heat out of the surrounding air, dropping the local temperature around the hutch by several degrees.
So summer is an active battle against the heat. But what about winter? The notes say adult birds are remarkably cold-hardy as long as they are protected from direct wind and dampness. So survival isn't the main issue.
Right, they handle the cold pretty well.
The real winter challenge is production. Fall and winter egg production. The guides are definitive on this. Hens require 14 to 16 hours of continuous light daily. Laying ceases completely in the fall and winter without supplemental lighting. Why does light equal eggs?
This is one of the most fascinating aspects of avian biology. A quail's reproductive endocrine system is directly hardwired to the photoperiod, the length of daylight they experience.
Why?
It is a brilliant evolutionary survival mechanism. In the wild, it makes zero biological sense to lay eggs and hatch fragile chicks in November when food is scarce and temperatures are dropping.
Right, the chicks would just freeze to death.
Precisely. So as the days naturally get shorter in the fall, deep inside the bird's brain specifically, encephalic photoreceptors in the hypothalamus and pineal gland that actually detect light passing right through their thin skulls sense the decreasing light hours.
Light literally passes through their skull.
Yes. And this triggers a drop in hormones like gonadotropin-releasing hormone. The reproductive system completely shuts down, they stop laying eggs, and they redirect all that saved metabolic energy into molting, growing a fresh, dense coat of winter feathers to survive the cold.
Which is an amazing survival trick for a wild bird, but terribly inconvenient for a homesteader who wants to bake a cake in December.
Right. So the homesteader essentially has to play Mother Nature by installing a simple warm-spectrum LED light on an automatic timer inside the quail enclosure and setting it to come on before dawn and stay on after dusk to guarantee 14 to 16 hours of continuous illumination. You biologically trick the quail's brain.
You simulate an endless perpetual summer.
Exactly. The encephalic photoreceptors sense the long hours of light. The brain says the days are long, it must be the height of the spring breeding season, and the hormones keep flowing. They will happily lay eggs right through a January freeze as long as they have 14 hours of light.
That is incredible. You are literally hacking their endocrine system with a $10 light bulb.
It's all about tricking the biology.
But let's talk about the harvest itself, both the meat and the eggs. The processing and yield data is really eye-opening. Birds are processed for meat at 7 to 8 weeks old, again, astonishingly fast. But the yield is only 4 to 6 ounces of dressed meat per bird. I did some quick homesteader math on that. Yielding 4 to 6 ounces means you are absolutely not roasting one of these for a family Sunday dinner.
It completely shifts your paradigm of what meat production looks like. A standard Cornish cross meat chicken might yield 4 or 5 pounds of meat in 8 weeks. One bird easily feeds a whole family.
Right.
A Coturnix quail yields roughly 1/4 of a pound. So to feed a family of 4, you aren't processing one bird, you're processing a batch of 6 to 8 birds at a time.
But the guides explicitly note that processing quail is vastly faster than chickens because they are skinned, not plucked.
Yes, and this makes batch processing highly efficient. Plucking a chicken is a time-consuming, messy ordeal involving scalding the carcass in hot water to loosen the follicles, and then manually pulling feathers or using a mechanical plucker.
Yeah, nobody likes plucking chickens.
Coturnix quail have incredibly delicate, paper-thin skin. If you try to put a quail in a mechanical plucker, the rubber fingers will tear the carcass to shreds. But because the skin is so thin and loosely attached to the muscle, it is incredibly easy to simply make a small incision and peel the skin and feathers off the carcass entirely in one smooth motion, much like skinning a rabbit.
So you bypass the plucking entirely.
Completely. A skilled homesteader can cleanly process a quail in under 2 minutes.
Okay, so if you were doing a batch of 10 birds for a dinner party, it takes you 20 minutes. That makes the small 4-ounce yield much more practical. Now, what about processing the eggs for breakfast? You can't just crack a tiny quail egg on the edge of your cast iron skillet, can you?
No, and this frustrates a lot of beginners who try it. Quail eggshells are visually beautiful and quite thin. The inner membrane, the structural protein sac that holds the yolk and the albumin inside the calcium carbonate shell, is incredibly tough and rubbery.
So if you just whack it on the side of the pan.
The brittle outer shell shatters into 100 microscopic shards, but the rubbery membrane flexes and doesn't break. So you squeeze it harder, the membrane finally bursts violently, and you drop a gooey egg mixed with 50 tiny pieces of sharp shell right into your frying pan.
That sounds like a culinary nightmare.
It is. That is why the guides specifically mandate the purchase and use of special quail egg scissors.
Quail egg scissors, you need custom cutlery.
They look exactly like a pair of high-end cigar cutters. You place the pointed, narrow end of the quail egg into a little circular loop, and a sharp guillotine-style blade snips the top of the shell and the tough membrane off cleanly in one swift motion.
Just off of its head.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
leaves a perfect little cup, and you just pour the pristine egg out. It is an absolutely mandatory tool for the quail homesteader.
I love the extreme specificity of this. You are buying a 30% game bird starter, you are building low-roof architectural bunkers, you are hacking their brains with LED lights, and you're using tiny guillotine scissors for your breakfast.
It's definitely specialized.
It truly is a masterclass in specialized husbandry. But there is one final crucial piece to this seasonal calendar that we have to cover. The flock turnover. The notes say that despite this massive, fast production, it plummets completely after 12 to 18 months. The birds just burn out,
They give it all they have fast.
and because they do not go broody, homesteaders must use an incubator to run annual flock rotations.
This is the engine room of the entire operation, because human selective breeding and those 14-hour LED lights have pushed these birds to lay upwards of 300 eggs in their first year, which is an absolutely staggering metabolic feat for a bird that size their reproductive systems essentially exhaust themselves by month 18.
They just run out of steam.
The egg production drops off a cliff. If you want a continuous, sustainable food source, you cannot just wait for them to build a nest and hatch their own replacement.
Because, as we established with the Easter egg hunt, they won't. They drop their eggs in the dirt and walk away to look for bugs.
Exactly. The maternal instinct to sit on a clutch of eggs for nearly 3 weeks has been almost entirely bred out of them in favor of continuous caloric output. So the homesteader has to step in and become the mother bird.
You take over the life cycle.
You collect the fertile eggs, you power up an incubator, and you manage the biology yourself.
And the timeline for the incubator in the notes is incredibly precise. 17 to 18 days to hatch. The temperature must be exactly 99.5 degrees Fahrenheit. And then there is a critical event called Day 15 lockdown. What exactly is happening inside that egg on Day 15 that requires a lockdown?
To understand lockdown, you have to understand the mechanics of incubation. During the first 14 days, the eggs must be turned constantly, either by hand or by an auto-turner.
Why do they need turning?
This prevents the developing embryo from physically sticking to the inner membrane of the shell. But on day 15, the chicks are fully formed. They are actively maneuvering inside the tight space of the shell, getting into the exact physiological position required to hatch.
So they're getting ready to break out.
If you continue turning the eggs on day 15, you disorient the chick, and it might not be able to align its beak with the air cell.
So on day 15, you stop all movement.
You stop turning them, you lay them flat on the hatching tray, and most importantly, you significantly increase the humidity in the incubator. This is crucial for the pip.
The pip being the moment they break the shell.
Right. But it happens in 2 stages. First is the internal pip, where the chick breaks into the air cell inside the egg and takes its first breath of actual air. Then the external pip, where it uses a tiny hardened egg tooth on its beak to crack the outer shell.
And the humidity helps with that.
By spiking the humidity during lockdown, you saturate the air. This prevents that tough inner membrane we talked about earlier from rapidly drying out and shrink-wrapping the chick once it makes that first crack in the shell.
Oh, because it would just glue them inside.
Exactly. You lock down the lid. You do not open it under any circumstances so you don't lose that humidity, and you wait for the hatch.
It is beautifully mechanical. It's like managing a perfectly tuned biological assembly line. By using the incubator, you control the exact pace of your food supply. You aren't beholden to a chicken deciding whether or not she feels like going broody this spring. You decide precisely when the harvest happens.
That is the ultimate draw of the Coturnix quail. It demands highly active, highly intentional management. You cannot be lazy with these birds. But in return for that dedication, it gives you absolute control over a highly productive, incredibly fast biological system.
Which brings us to the end of our deep dive. Let's recap the immense value of this bird for you, the listener, especially those of you running a small Alabama homestead. If you are looking to maximize your yield, the Coturnix quail offers you a microscopic spatial footprint.
It fits almost anywhere.
It offers explosive warp speed growth. It gives you a dual-purpose yield of both high-quality meat and daily eggs. And frankly, it forces you to take a masterclass in hands-on animal husbandry. From understanding the amino acid profiles in their feed, to the physics of the flush reflex, to managing the chemistry of ammonia, to playing Mother Nature with encephalocate photoreceptors in incubators.
It is a remarkable, highly engineered creature that asks a lot of the homesteader's intellect and attention, but gives back exponentially more in food security. But as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a philosophical concept to ponder as you look at your own backyard.
Let's hear it.
Homesteading, in its traditional sense, is a practice defined almost entirely by patience. You plant an apple tree, and you wait 5 years to see your first real fruit. You raise a steer, and you invest 2 years of feeding and waiting before you harvest the beef. You wait entire seasons, watching the weather, hoping for a crop.
It's all about the long game.
But with the Coturnix quail, you are managing a life cycle that reaches full adulthood and produces tangible food in mere weeks. So the question is, when you bring an animal onto your property that operates at such an incredibly fast-forwarded pace, How does actively managing that hyper-accelerated life cycle fundamentally change the way you perceive time, success, and the rhythm of sustainability on your own homestead?
That is a deeply fascinating question. Does managing something so fast make you more impatient with the rest of your garden? Or does it make you hyper-attuned to the micro seasons of daily life? It's definitely something to chew on, and it brings us right back to where we started. When you look at that tiny little wire hutch in the corner of the yard, you aren't just looking at a small footprint. You're looking at a hyper-efficient, high-speed engine of absolute abundance, completely flipping the script on what it means to grow your own food. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.